Good afternoon. Today I'm standing at the edge of Wath Wood. Wath Wood, it should be called Wath Woods because the woodland is made up of three separate woods. There's Wath Wood proper, there's Boyd Royd Wood, and there's also the smallest one, which is called Fox Cover. I'm actually on the edge of Wath Wood proper and Fox Cover at the moment. Now behind me, this big space of land which you can see, which lies between the woodland and Blackamoor Road, is actually known as Butler's Park. That's the old name for it, and it was named after a chap called Edward Butler, who was one of the many partners of Swinton Pottery. We'll speak more about Swinton Pottery maybe later on in the week, but I'm looking at something in Wath Wood now which is very, very interesting feature, and we're just going to have a little wander past these lovely oak trees and just have a look and see what we can find. So what looks like a fairly insignificant hole in the ground is actually, if you can make out the stonework around the edge of this pit, it's actually called locally Caesar's Well. Now, it was nothing to do with Julius Caesar, nothing to do with any other Caesars, to be fair, but the Victorians called anything of any antiquity Roman. This was actually a well, and if I can move around to the far side of the structure, at this point there is actually a stone spout. Now the well is dry at the moment. It's been dry for as long as I can remember. But water courses do change over time. And even though the winter of 2019-2020 was probably one of the wettest we've had on record, we've been through quite a dry spell at the moment. But even during the wettest spells, I don't remember the water flowing into this well at all. Now, if we can look at the other side of the structure, I hope you can actually see going down. There's the remains of a curved masonry there. Now that curved masonry is actually what remains of what would have been a roof over the well. Now this probably dates from round about the 17th century. We don't know exactly when that would be, but it's more than absolutely would have been here for animals. Wherever you keep animals, you do need a supply of water for those animals. And a similar well to this can be found in Conisbrough on Wellgate, which has still got its stone arch roof over it. So even though it's called Caesar's Well, it's absolutely nothing to do with the Romans, but it does indicate that this area has been used for animal husbandry for many centuries. Now, something else quite close to us here, which is again, we're so fortunate in this area to have something of this antiquity and importance, is I'm going to move slightly. I'm just on the edge of Wath Wood and Fox Cover, as I said before, the smallest woodland. There's a wonderful carpet of bluebells here, which we'll try and avoid. I'm actually now stood in a ditch, and I'm about 6 foot tall, but at the back of me you can see the rise of an embankment. So we've got a ditch where I'm stood, an embankment to my back, and this is part of the famous South Yorkshire Roman Rigg Dyke. And if you can peek through the trees there, you can see how the dyke goes away down there, and the dyke was constructed between Sheffield and Mexborough. Now, we had actually in this area another important branch off the dyke through Swinton Common down towards Kilnest. So there was a branch off the dyke going towards Kilnest. So all the way from Sheffield, all the way to Mexborough, sections of embankment, sections of ditch, Nobody really knows why. It certainly was not Roman, even though the Victorians called it the Roman Rigg Dyke. It certainly wasn't Roman. Now, beyond Doncaster as well, there are another series of ditches and dykes, but that's not for today. We'll just concentrate on what we have in our part of South Yorkshire. Now, there are various theories about this, and no one knows exactly why it was constructed, who constructed it, but I stress an amazing feat of ancient engineering. And on top of the embankment there where the footpath is, it's been speculated there was probably a palisade fencing. So its purpose, was it defensive? Was it a boundary? We don't know. A lot of sense would say it was defensive. I'll come back to that in a moment. Possibly it was built by the Brigantine tribe, which were an Iron Age tribe which existed in our part of Yorkshire well before the Roman invasion. They were still thriving when the Romans came, and the Brigantines had an enormous hill fort on the hill at Winkerbank, above Meadow Hall, where the houses at Winkerbank is. They had a fort of the Brigantine tribe existed at Winkerbank. The Romans actually built a large fort, an industrial complex and settlement at Templeborough, round about the point where Magna is now. It was built over by the steelworks in 1915 and excavated. But the Roman fort at Templeborough was almost like a counterpoint to the Brigantine fort at Winkerbank. Now, the Romans didn't always suppress everybody. They forged alliances with many tribes, and provided those tribes did what the Romans wanted and coexisted side by side, they'd generally be left alone to administer their own affairs. So, was this part of an Iron Age building, a defence that marked out the territory of the Brigantine tribes? Maybe. A second theory takes us up to round about the year 400 AD, just beyond 400 AD actually. The Romans had withdrawn from Britain at that time. They'd all gone. That we entered the period what was known as the Dark Ages. But around that time, there formed a new kingdom was formed. Many small kingdoms existed in what was England at that time, and there was a kingdom called Elmet. We still get the name Sherwood in Elmet, for example, and it was that side of Yorkshire, the sort of north side of where I'm standing, and down towards the south, looking away towards the south, was the kingdom of Mercia. Now, the theory about defence does stack up very, very well, because if I go to the top of the Dyke now, we can actually look down. We're looking down to the valley of the River Don, and the first rule of any military tactician is you try and command the high ground. We are here commanding the high ground. If you can see through the trees, we're looking down towards the River Don, the Don Valley. Now, the Don in times of past was a far bigger river than what it is now, because thousands and thousands of gallons of water are diverted from the River Don to basically fill reservoirs that service the South Yorkshire navigation, the canal system. So the River Don would have been much wider, much more water in it. At the side of either side of the River Don, there would have been huge floodplains, marshy ground, which would flood when the river was high. So we're looking at a defensive position here. We're looking at a defensive position, nice and high. Imagine the Rigg Dyke with a wooden palisade fencing on the top, ditch in the front of us. We're looking now, we're commanding the high ground. So the defensive system does stack up quite well. Another theory is possibly it was even done not for military purposes, but almost as an agreed boundary. Between Mercia and Elmet. That side's yours, this side's ours. We'll both get on with it. The trees weren't here then, the trees came much later, and that's a story for another day. So the fantastic, misnamed Roman Rigg Dyke runs all the way from Sheffield, all the way through to Mexborough. An important branch goes down to Kilness, goes down to where it would meet the River Don, almost like to where I'm standing now, to the right of me, through Swinton Common down to Kilness, an important branch off. So we're so lucky to have this embankment. Sadly, in recent years, it has been damaged significantly by people digging it out, using it as a bike track. It's a wonderful resource. It's a protected, scheduled ancient monument, and it crops up all the way through from the Netherhorf and Romarsh and Abdy, and here in Wath Wood, and right the way through to the boundary between St Margaret's Church. You can follow the line of the famous Rigg Dyke. So that's all for today. I hope you can join me tomorrow for another quick 10-minute history tour. Stay safe, everybody, especially special greetings to those people who are having to shield or self-isolate. Take care, and you will get through this. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.